Greetings, everyone. This is Warren Sprouse. You're watching the Bible Forum. We're here every Sunday night from 8 to 10 p.m. This is July 17th, 2016. We are facing the Republican Party convention coming up just next week. And I wanted to share with you some of the things that I've learned about the party platform. This past week, 112 delegates met to hammer out a platform upon which the presumptive candidate, Donald Trump, is going to run. The candidates have impact on these platforms, and so it helps when they tell you what they're talking about. This is the kind of thing that he's got input and is kind of coalescing around whatever it is that's important to him. Now keep in mind, when we get together next week, it may have changed because the accumulated delegates get to vote on this, I think on Tuesday, but I'm not sure. But they will be looking at not just a conservative platform when it comes to finances and to political things, but they're looking at a more traditionalist view of the family and of child rearing. The platform will come out against women in the military going to combat. It will describe coal as a clean energy source, and it will declare pornography a public health crisis. Can I get an amen? What Republicans will probably end up with when they formally vote next week is a text that can seem almost Victorian in its moralizing and deeply critical view of how modern American family has evolved. The platform demands that lawmakers use religion as a guide when legislating, stipulating, quote, that man-made law must be consistent with God-given natural rights, end of quote. Can you get behind that? It also encourages the teaching of the Bible in public schools. Yeah. Because the amendment said a good understanding of it, that is the Bible's contents, is, quote, indispensable for the development of an educated citizenry, end of quote. What are they talking about? They're talking about this nation. They're talking about our fundamental principles that were rooted in that book. They're talking about our morality, our family structure, which is the bedrock of all that we are. And it all comes from this book. The pornography provision was not in an initial draft that the Republican National Committee drew up and released on Sunday, but delegates added it on Monday. At the same time, they were inserting many of the amendments opposing gay and transgender rights. It calls pornography, quote, a public menace, end of quote, that is especially harmful to children. Much of the most combative debate centered on language in the platform that describes gay and transgender people and the efforts to strip those words out and replace them with language proposed by a minority contingent of socially moderate delegates. An amendment to specifically recognize that gay people are targets of the Islamic State caused a bit of a stir among the more conservative delegates, who said they felt there was no need to single out any one group. They also shot down multiple attempts by a small group to soften the platform's anti-gender and gay rights language, at the same time approving efforts to force the federal government to hand over all public lands to states. Of any issue, the full platform committee spent the longest time discussing whether to encourage states to teach the Bible as a literature elective in public schools. the proposal was ultimately adopted. Louisiana Delegate Tony Perkins proposed language endorsing so-called conversion or reparative therapy. This is a highly questionable practice. It has been widely criticized by doctors and by therapists as one of those tools they have to cure homosexuals through analysis and oftentimes prayer. The new platform language which the committee approved does not actually explicitly mention the practice, but says parents should be allowed, quote, to determine the proper treatment or therapy, end of quote, for their children. The reality is there is no therapy for homosexuality, transgender. There is merely a confrontation with reality, and like it or not, a biblical reality, because it is only in the Bible that we are given any instruction about what a human being is and why that human being is here and what these various genders are all about. Everything else is conjecture. But you see, if we have just simply evolved up through the ooze, we're still in a state of flux, and we have yet to become what we're fully going to become. And it's possible that we have reached a point, a stage in developmental process where things are becoming more fluid. Excuse me. When it came to the family, the GOP Platform Committee approved a plank opposing policies that encourage cohabitation. Well, there's an antique, if you ever want to see one. They're opposing policies that encourage cohabitation. On education, the delegates agreed that, quote, a good understanding of the Bible is indispensable to the development of an educated citizenry, end of quote. Students should be able to take biblical literature as an elective in public schools. The discussion occupied the most time of any single issue taken up by the full platform committee in the afternoon. Other education stances approved Monday included a new amendment to the Constitution that would give parents the right to direct their children's education and a rejection of pre-kindergarten courses, classes, whatever you're calling that, pre-kindergarten. You do know what that is. That's our socialist government trying to get mothers out of the home and into the workplace so the government can have access to the children at a much younger age. We started with kindergarten, didn't used to have kindergarten, but we put kindergarten in, then we went into pre-kindergarten, and we have a K1, K2, we got all these things, preschool. We have classes or places to put children as young as 6 months. The government wants them in these, I don't know what to call them. I almost call them ministries. They're not. The more harsh term I don't want to use, and so you can pick one for yourself. The committee added language opposing early child education because, as one committee member said, quote, it inserts the state in the family relationship at a very early age in the child's life. The idea is that's not a good thing. When it came to immigration, they said while it has not been debated by the full committee, there is a subcommittee that gave preliminary approval of support for building the wall between the United States and Mexico. Mexico said they're not going to pay for it, by the way. Is it practical to build a wall? Yeah, it's very practical to build a wall. You say, well, you can't build a wall that's 1,000 miles long. Israel's doing it. Israel's building a wall all around their country. What else can you do to protect your borders? We thought the Rio Grande would protect us. The few people that swim across there, picked up by Border Patrol. But they're coming across on the trains and on the buses and hiding in trucks and all the rest of it and on airplanes. And we're letting them do it. So if you stop that, they're going to keep coming. We need the wall. Ask some of the farmers, some of the ranchers out in West Texas. Ask them what they have to put up with every day, every night. It's dangerous out there. They're coming across, they're tearing down their fences, and they're just walking across. Abortion, Trump has said he opposes abortion. He's called for doctors who perform the procedure to be punished. That's pretty strong. But he's also supported adding exceptions for rape and incest, or when the woman's life is in jeopardy. No such exceptions exist in the current Republican platform. We'll see how that plays out. When it comes to the IRS, the GOP Platform Committee speedily approved calling for the abolition of the IRS. Can I hear an amen? Did you hear, was it several months ago, that the IRS has a computer system that their employees use with what they call an architecture, a computer architecture, the thing that actually runs the computer, that was designed in the 1980s. They have not kept pace. $20 trillion in debt, and we can't even buy a computer. Do you want a 1980s era computer? I don't. That's an 8088 chip. That's before they started with the 36s, with the 230s, the 430s, or whatever it was. And now they've just moved on exponentially. And these people are still back in the Stone Age. I started with computers in the early 80s, mid 80s, something like that. We had batch files. You didn't even have Windows yet. These people are using that architecture. When it comes to pornography, they said the internet must not become a safe haven for predators. Pornography, with its harmful effects, especially on children, has become a public health crisis that is destroying the life of millions. The committee said we encourage states to continue to fight this public menace, and we pledge our commitment to children's safety and well-being. We applaud the social networking sites that bar sex offenders from participation. We urge energetic persecution of child pornography, which is closely linked to human trafficking. When it comes to trade, the biggest gap between Trump and his party lies on the issue of trade. Trump has called for an America First trade strategy that rejects current international agreements that have long been strongly supported by the GOP. He says he can negotiate better deals. Do you believe him? I think I do. All planks approved by subcommittees must still be approved this week by the full platform committee, and then by the full convention next week. Now, the full platform committee has no doubt met by now. We're already into Sunday, and the other delegates will get together. The full convention will convene next week. I don't know if it's Monday or Tuesday, and they'll work through this. If they approve this, even 90% of this, could you then vote for Trump? What about Vice President Pence, having him on board? Does that make it easier to vote for Trump? Vote a Republican ticket? We've been through this whole thing with the Republicans in this go-round, last couple of times actually, last couple of cycles, where they've trotted out all of these people who are born-again Christians. What about Mike Pence? Well, Mike Pence has described himself as a pretty ordinary Christian. He's described himself as a Christian, a conservative, and a Republican, in that order. But he also once said, I made a commitment to Christ. I'm a born-again evangelical Catholic. Now, that's not a combination you hear every day. One journalist, Greg Furman, who's covered the Indiana governor for some time, pointed out that that was strange. But here are 5 faith facts about Mike Pence and how his unusual faith mixes together and has shaped him as a politician. First of all, he was raised Catholic. Now that's technically Roman Catholic. He's not Greek Orthodox. He's not Russian Orthodox. He's not Eastern Orthodox or any of that. He's Roman Catholic. All those other groups are Catholic too. And he later attended an evangelical megachurch. Now, I don't know which is worse. That's another discussion. He talks about growing up in an Irish Catholic family where he reportedly revered the Kennedys. He served as an altar boy. He went to a parochial school in Columbus, Indiana. Pence has said he made that, quote, commitment to Christ, end of quote, while taking part in a non-denominational Christian student group in college. Pence told the Indianapolis Star that he and his family attended Grace Evangelical Church in the 1990s, but by 2013, he said, we were kind of looking for a church. Secondly, he has supported causes that are important to evangelicals while he was a congressman. As a member of the U.S. House from 2000 until his election as governor, Mike Pence had a reputation as a culture warrior, a reputation that, according to roll call, was somewhat pretty good. It was unsullied, is the way they characterized it. The website lists his bona fides. He opposed the expansion of abortion rights and federal spending on embryonic stem cell research, pushed a constitutional amendment against same-sex marriage, and briefly cut off new federal funding for Planned Parenthood. Thirdly, he clashed with the Catholic Archdiocese of Indianapolis over refugees. Late last year, he got into this back and forth when he halted state support for efforts to relocate refugees, citing security concerns. The Archdiocese defied him by welcoming a Syrian family to the city anyway. In the end, the governor said that while he disagreed with the Archdiocese's action, he would not block food stamps or other state aid for the family. On the other hand, he came out against Trump's plan to halt all Muslim immigration to the United States, tweeting last December that, quote, calls to ban Muslims from entering the U.S. are offensive and unconstitutional, end of quote. I wonder how he feels now. Fourthly, he supports Israel. Pundits have said that one of the main reasons Trump picked Pence is his strong pro-Israel sentiment, that this would go nicely with the Donald, because he has a shaky relationship with Jewish voters. His son-in-law is Jewish, but voters don't think he's all as favorable toward Jewish as they'd like him to be. Speaking before the AIPAC in 2009, then Representative Pence said, let me say emphatically, like the overwhelming majority of my constituents, my Christian faith compels me to cherish the state of Israel. He backed that up last December at the Republican Jewish Coalition's conference when he said, Israel's enemies are our enemies. Israel's cause is our cause. If this world knows nothing else, let it know this: America stands with Israel. Fifthly, he signed Indiana's controversial religious freedom law. Last year, he found himself at the center of a storm when he supported that Restoration Act, an act which would have allowed businesses and individuals to refuse to do business with some people based on their own religious beliefs. I don't have to bake your cake if you're going to have a same-sex marriage or wedding. In his 2016 State of the State address, he said, I will not support any bill that diminished the religious freedom of Hoosiers or that interferes with the constitutional rights of our citizens to live out their beliefs in worship, service, or work. No one should ever fear persecution because of their deeply held religious beliefs. Can I get an amen? His stance on the issue has made him the darling of evangelicals and other conservatives, and he signed the bill into law last March. But a week later, he had to sign a revised version after major corporations and organizations and celebrities vowed to boycott Indiana. Who is Mike Pence? Is he a born-again Catholic? Is he an evangelical Catholic? I would venture to say there are such animals out there. I have talked to people that I honestly believe are born again of the Spirit of God, and for one reason or another, they have not chosen to leave the Catholic Church. But here's a man who chose to leave the Catholic Church, went to a so-called evangelical church. It's a mega church, which is a non-church, but it wasn't Catholic, and then left there. It doesn't say in the article whether he is attending Mass, but he definitely has that culture. He grew up that way. He went to Catholic schools and, the whole 9 yards. What does it say about him? At the very least, I think it says he's ambivalent, that he's not quite sure how to hold these two things in the same hand. And he's not sure because you cannot hold them both in the same hand. Roman Catholic doctrine is not evangelical Christian doctrine. Roman Catholic doctrine stands foursquare against evangelical Christian doctrine. The Roman Catholic Church instituted persecutions, inquisitions, and other such things against evangelical Christian practice and doctrine. They're not friendly. We got a liberal pope. Everybody's okay with this guy. But the doctrine is what drives the church, and it is not friendly to evangelicalism. There's no such thing as an evangelical Catholic. But what does that really mean? I think it means that Pence is a straight shooter and a great guy. I think he's somebody you wouldn't mind having to dinner, you wouldn't mind being friends with. I think he's a smart guy. I think that if he's given the opportunity, he can straighten a bunch of things out. Boy, I sure would like to. But I wouldn't vote for him because he's an evangelical Catholic Christian. I don't think you ought to vote for people just because they're Christians anyway. But I got to tell you, the movement in this last week or two, plus the things that the Donald has been saying and doing in the last month, have made me wonder if somebody hasn't gotten to him or if he can be taught. We'll see.